And we're live. Happy Friday, everyone. And go Jazz. That was an awesome win. I'll break it down. I'll go over the stats a little bit, but anyone who's on it's just started, so probably no one's on. But read the pinned comment. And if you're watching this video after it's live, leave comment. The pinned comment is just asking your NBA questions. So leave your comments down below. We'll get to them. We like to keep the conversation going there. But this was an awesome winning for the Jazz against the Hawks. It was their one-game homestand before they go back on the road. Next game is Sunday versus the Denver Nuggets. So I'll talk a little bit about that later on. But first, I want to dig into this win. And there is not much for me to be critical of the Jazz, which I feel like every time I do one of these videos, win or loss, I spend about 70-80% of the video just criticizing the Jazz and what they need to improve on. But this one was an overall good win. I'll touch on a couple things that I think we should keep our eye on, but I think the Jazz overall have been fixing a lot of the main issues that we saw during the first 5, 6, 7 games of the season. So to go into this game, I think the two big difference makers that I saw were how the Jazz started. Mike Conley came out hot, and the Jazz got off to a good lead early, and it went back and forth. The Hawks came back, brought it back within 10 several times throughout the game. The Hawks, they're a good team. They're missing two key players, which helped the Jazz out. But I'm glad even though they're under 500 after this loss, I'm glad the Jazz came in and they came out aggressive, because the Hawks are one of those teams that they have Trae Young, they have John Collins, they have lots of other pieces that can really go off on you offensively. So I'm super happy. Mike Conley came out on fire. The Jazz came out on fire. They took a good lead early. And I think that's huge for this team. They need to come out early every game, because I've noticed third quarter, early fourth quarter, a lot of times that team loses energy. And if you're up by 12 points in the first quarter, then I don't want them to lose energy. But if they do lose a little energy in that third quarter or early fourth quarter, then it's not as big of a deal, because you already had that lead. So it's giving you a little bit of a cushion. And so I think that's a key to success for the Jazz every game for the rest of the season, unless I see them maybe the rotation gets a little deeper, so that energy problem isn't as much of an issue. Another key to success is what the Jazz defense did against Trae Young. He finished the game with 4 points, and he didn't score until the second half of the second quarter. And that is incredible, because Trae Young, obviously, he's one of the he's one of the best offensive weapons in the league. Last year, he was just lethal. Obviously, this team has more weapons this year, so even if he has an off night like tonight, it's still possible that the Hawks could win games like this. Granted, they are missing Bear Bogdanovich and Gallinari, so those are two big pieces that they're missing. If they were here, it might have been a little bit of a different story, but with how the Jazz were playing, I don't think so. I think the Jazz win this game even if the Hawks are completely healthy. So, and just watching the Jazz, they forced Trae Young into a lot of bad shots. They forced him to shoot a lot of mid-range shots, which he doesn't like. And they really forced him off the three-point line, and Rudy was keeping him out of the paint. So that was awesome to see. I love that game plan coming in, because it shows that the Jazz can come in to games and really they can target a key player. Like, you saw them do stuff like this in years past with James Harden, and it didn't work as well against the Rockets and James Harden. But I think maybe they're having these pieces. Quinn Snyder is figuring out new ways to shut down offensive stars, which have been tough for the Jazz in the past, especially offensive perimeter stars, because I feel like the Jazz really don't have a true lockdown perimeter defender. So seeing what they were able to do tonight gave me a lot of hope for the future. Let's go over some more stats. I'll start with some team stats, and we can go over some plus minus and some highlights from both teams in the box score. But for the team stats, the Jazz, as far as shooting goes, pretty normal except for threes. They shot 20 for 44 as a team, which is just under 46%. That's awesome. I think that was another huge key to success is the threes were falling, especially for Mitchell. He took some deep threes and they were falling. He was confident today. So I'm excited to see that continue because I think that is another key for Jazz wins is if Mitchell comes out confident, even if the shots don't always fall, if he keeps the level of confidence that he had tonight, I think that will help the Jazz win a lot of games. Overall, the Jazz really beat the Hawks in pretty much everything, but turnovers. And the turnovers, it wasn't like there was a huge differential, but this is something the Jazz have been struggling with all year. This game, they had 19 turnovers to the Hawks 15, so both of those aren't great. You want to see low double-digit turnovers or even keep them in the single digits, but that can be tough in the NBA. The Jazz almost had 20, which is 20 possessions they gave up. That's awful. That's something the Jazz need to work on, but I'm not going to be too critical on it because most of the other points that I've been criticizing the Jazz on thus far, they've been solving. So I'm anticipating that as they get back into their rhythm, Donovan stays confident, they keep coming out strong um, and taking leads early, then I think they'll eventually get through that turnover problem and they'll take care of it in the next 5 or 10 games or so. But yeah, not much. The Hawks never led. The Jazz, their biggest lead was 30, so that's awesome. Going through the box score, just on the Hawks side, no one really stood out. I guess you could say Cam Reddish, he had 20 points. Clint Capella had 11 rebounds and 16 points, so both of them they did okay, nothing like crazy. Almost every player on the Hawks was a minus, especially starters. Cam Reddish, who was their highest scorer, was a minus 34 in the plus minus. So that really shows that even though the Hawks had some moments, the Jazz dominated this game, and that's what you'd expect after seeing the final score. But the Jazz is like the complete opposite. They had one player who's in the negative with Azubuike. He played 7 minutes. Didn't do much. He had a rebound. He's a rookie. That's okay. We can live with that. But looking at, like I was talking about Conley, how he came out strong. He did more like his box score isn't super impressive. He did good, 15 points, 8 assists, 4 steals, but he was a plus 30. And that was the highest on the team. And I think his presence, him being out there, him starting off strong, really helped the Jazz secure this. Obviously, we're looking at our other stars. Mitchell, he did awesome, 26 points, but there's really not much to dig into the stats here because the Jazz just did such a good job at dominating the Hawks, which I like to see. So I'm looking forward to next game against the Nuggets. We talked last weekend about this game a little bit. We'll probably talk a little bit more about it tomorrow in our Saturday episode. But the Nuggets, they're who beat us in the playoffs. I'm expecting the Jazz to ride this 4-game win streak, push it to 5. I think they're going to go into Denver energized. They're going to want that game. And I'm really excited for Sunday's game. So make sure you tune in for our post-game review of that game. It's going to be great no matter the turnout. I don't anticipate a blowout unless it's the Jazz blowing out the Nuggets, but I'm excited to see what that turns into. So I'm going to check the comments real quick. So if you have an NBA question, make sure you comment it in the live chat. But real quick, if you haven't liked the video, make sure you like it. If you aren't subscribed to our channel, please subscribe. We put out Utah Jazz content. We really try to focus in on the Jazz. We don't think there's enough Utah Jazz YouTube videos out there. So subscribe if you haven't. We try to put a post-game video out every game. We've done so far this season. We're going to try to keep that up. We might miss one, but we're going to do our best to keep that up. And every weekend we put out 1 or 2 episodes. So make sure you've subscribed to the channel so you can keep getting that Utah Jazz content that we put out. So I'll start at the top. How much? So Carter, he asked, how much closer do you think it could have been if Trae had a good game? That's always an interesting one. It's tough to say exactly because every time a star player has a good game, he's always taking shots away from other people. But at the same time, the Hawks couldn't trust anyone on offense. So it definitely would have been a much different game. Trae Young, he didn't shoot a ton. He shot 11 shots. He was 1 for 11, 0 for 2 from 3. 2 of his points were from the free throw line. So I think it definitely would have been closer. The stretches with the Hawks were looking good. Instead of getting to within 8 points, they probably would have gotten within 4 or 2 points. But with how confident the Jazz were and just how good their defense was, I think even if Trae Young had a good game, it wouldn't have been like a stellar game. He would have had 20, like low 20s, and it wouldn't have been much of a difference maker to win this game. And if he had a good game, he might have shot more, and he might have been shooting 30s with how the Jazz were playing him. So I don't think it would have been huge. I think the Jazz would have definitely won. It may have been a 15-point game or a 10-point game instead of a 24-point game. So uh, I was hoping to see more from Trae Young. Obviously, I'm happy the Jazz shut him down, but Trae Young is one of those players that's fun to watch. So he was nowhere on the court tonight. He had a few nice assists, but that's about it. Top 3 wins so far. I agree. I don't think I mentioned this at the beginning, but I think other than the Bucks game, this is my most exciting win for the Jazz so far. Even though the Hawks were hurt, they had 2 key players out. I think the Hawks are an underrated team, even though they're below 500. I think they will make the playoffs this year. I think they have good pieces. There is some locker room issues with John Collins, Trae Young. I don't think that's going to show up on the court as much as other issues could. But I thought this was going to be not necessarily a tough win for the Jazz, but one that if they slacked off like they did against some other easy teams earlier this season, then it could have been the same thing as we saw against the Timberwolves and what we were seeing from the Jazz then. So I think this is a huge win. 4 wins in a row is a huge step. We're starting to see the Jazz play how we were expecting them to play. Obviously, there's a few things to iron out, but I'm not terribly worried about that at this point. I agree. Hughes, like younger players, bench. I think, especially since the Jazz in these last few games, they kind of blew the teams out. I would like to see deeper rotations from the Jazz. I do understand the Jazz, even the starters are trying to get into their rhythm, but I'm hoping to see throughout the season, hopefully the Jazz are in the rhythm, the starters are in the rhythm. Clarkson has been pretty consistent. He was kind of mad this game, but that's okay. Hopefully we can see more of the rookies. We can see Hughes play. We can see Azubuike kind of get into rhythm and see his defensive potential start coming out this season. Turnovers, I mentioned that they need to be worked on. That's probably the next. If the Jazz can keep this level of play and lower their turnovers to even just less than 15 a game, because right now I think they're averaging over 15, then I think the Jazz are right there at that 2-3 spot right there. So glad Mitchell's been better lately. Those first few games are scary until the fourth for him. I think this is. I don't think Mitchell did anything like much different lately, but I think he's just been a little more confident. The shots were falling tonight, so I'm glad Mitchell's kind of stepping into that role. I want to see him 26 every night, 26 plus. So I'm excited to see what we get out of Mitchell here on out. We've talked a lot about how the Jazz offense really runs through Mitchell, and when he's hot, everything works out. When he's not, then they struggle sometimes, and that's really how the roster is built. Is Gobert doesn't make his own offense, and the other players on the Jazz don't really make their own offense. It's really Mitchell or Clarkson who make their own offense. But if one of those two guys, really Mitchell, because Clarkson is more, he's focusing on scoring. He's trying to get the ball in the basket. He's not always looking for the best pass. I've noticed he's been doing better at distributing this season. So maybe he'll turn into like just Mitchell 2.0, less athletic, but better shooter. But the Jazz offense, with if those two guys are hot, or even just one of them, then it flows a lot better, and the Jazz have a much better chance of winning. Gobert, he was. I did think Gobert played good. He did what we expected of him. I don't think he had any like, from what I saw, any like huge monster plays. But then again, most players didn't, except for Mitchell, because it was just a blowout. You didn't why like a huge play. It could happen, but is it a really huge play when you're winning by 20? Unless it's like life changing. So I'm happy with what I saw from everyone. Royce O'Neal. I think Royce O'Neal and Niang. I think earlier in the season, I was bagging on them a little bit, saying that they're not really the difference makers that the Jazz needed. But the past couple games, I've been liking what I've seen from them. Yang has been getting more minutes, which is awesome, and he's kind of hitting his stride. So I'm glad to see that. But yeah, Jordan Clarkson started off slow tonight. First half, he had nothing. Finished with 16 points. So I really like where the Jazz are heading. I hope you guys are as optimistic as I am about them. Like Jordan Clarkson looks like a front runner for Sixth Man of the Year. Donovan Mitchell is a lock for All-Star unless some crazy injury happens. And the Jazz are really clicking. Really, as long as they can keep this up, start off hot, let Mitchell thrive, keep his confidence up, let him take tough shots because they fall when he takes them, and then just work on turnovers, then you're looking at a team that teams aren't going to want to face in the playoffs, which in the past, I feel like a lot of teams, they knew the Jazz weren't easy, but they'd take the Jazz over other teams. But at this point, the Jazz are really looking like, in the long term, by the end of the season, if they keep this level of play and keep improving at the rate that they have been, they're going to be scary. And I'm really excited to see it play out. So hopefully you guys are as optimistic as we are. I'm going to wrap up the video right now. But if you're here and you want to keep chatting, once the live stream is ended, that video is still there. So just comment there. We'll keep commenting. We'll keep having that conversation until it gets like way too late and we actually have to go to sleep, and then we'll continue up tomorrow because we just love talking about Jazz basketball. If you have any questions about James Harden, that our take on that, you can ask us in the comments. We'll probably touch on that a little bit in our videos tomorrow. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel. I know I mentioned that earlier, but we're going to be posting some stuff tomorrow. You won't want to miss it. We'll talk about the next few games for the Jazz as well as what we saw from this winning streak. So I'm excited. Go Jazz. This is awesome to see what we're seeing. And thanks for tuning in, everyone. Have a good night.